I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, Duncan Hawksbee. Duncan is the Director of Strategic Execution at Trimble and owns the company's OKR program and works directly with their leadership team on their strategy execution process. He's a practicing OKR coach and results management leader for nearly 4 years and has been with Trimble for 29 years. Impressive. You're going to hear a ton of best practices from Duncan, and along with Duncan, I'm going to introduce Mike Hipp, our Chief Revenue Officer, who oversees all of our customer operations globally. So please welcome Duncan and Mike.
And I should add that I started at Trimble as a baby.
And the preamble is we have tough acts to follow. And we were seated with no props. So we're going to do our best to keep the energy level high. And I've had the pleasure of being a partner to Trimble and the journey that you've been on for years now. So maybe you just start with, what does that journey look like? And then the other context is Duncan and I, in collaborating for the discussion, thought it would be wholly appropriate to approach the conversation through the lens of what may sound like a reflect and reset. So what are the victories that you and the team have achieved, more importantly, that the business has achieved? What were the learnings along the way? And then what adjustments have you been thinking about as you enter the next fiscal year? So we thought that format would be appropriate for the discussion.
And just before we get into that, just to give everyone a quick heads up on what Trimble is. A few of you have asked me that question through the last couple of days. Trimble is an industrial technology company focused on kind of 3 core sectors: construction, what we call field systems, and transportation. At the core of our being is GPS technology, going back to 1978. We as a company have transformed ourselves from a hardware company. When I joined 29 years ago, we were predominantly a hardware company. Now we're like 75% software and 25% kind of enabling hardware. So that's kind of like the background to Trimble.
Great. So in the category of victories, there are many. One of the things that I've been able to experience firsthand is the way that the leadership team at Trimble has used and it's not the process, but really getting radically clear on prioritization and what matters most to the business. So if you can talk about how that's manifested, how that's in the rhythm of the business, I think that would be great.
Okay, so in 2024, we did have a little bit of a shift. Our CEO at the end of last year started challenging our businesses on what he perceived to be the most important things to do for the businesses in 2024. The businesses were allowed a chance to respond and react, but the CEO had an override if he disagreed. But from that, we ended up creating what we call a set of big rocks, things that must be done by the end of the year. And when we actually took those big rock initiatives and actually worked with businesses to create key results tied to objectives. And our first pass, we ended up with 210 key results. All right, think about that, 210. Now, our CEO he likes diving in the detail. He's a finance guy. He wanted to track all 210. So myself and my leader, who's the SVP of strategy, said, that's not practical. We're going to give you a slimmed down list of what we think are the most important things. And again, we can have a discussion about whether you agree with us. He did agree with us. And we got it down to a very arbitrary number. We got it down to 39. So we have 39 key results that are tied to big rocks. The CEO has a key result at his level tracking the progress of all 39 of those key results. Those key results exist at varying levels in the organization, from level 2 down to level 6 and 7. Trust me, when we told the people at level 6 and 7 that their key result had been identified as a committed key result to the CEO's key result, what do you think happened?
Attention.
Yeah, attention. I ended up getting phone calls saying, really? My key result? What does that mean for me? It's like, well, you have to deliver, because that's what the CEO is expecting. So the kind of the byproduct of all of this is what we've seen is we've created a level of accountability through transparency, because the CEO can see what's going on with all those key results, that we didn't have in the past. So I would say that's been a victory for us this year. We've created real focus and real accountability. Are we making progress on that particular key result, tracking the 39? Yes. Is it where we want it to be? Not quite. But some of those key results are very backloaded to Q4. So I would expect we are going to get really, really close to the 100% by the end of December.
Now that you have prioritization and the big rocks have been identified and the localization of the key results is in place, how does that inform the operating rhythm? And you introduced me to the concept of the mid-quarter review. What is that all about?
Yeah, so I've heard people mention in some of the other conversations around MQRs and QBRs. So Trimble has built into its operating rhythm QBRs, quarterly business reviews. But they are very much focused on business metrics, so financials. We tried to weave in kind of OKR kind of report outs into the QBR process, and it just didn't fly. But in our operating rhythm, we also had mid-quarter reviews, MQRs, which were meant to be like a check-in for the business leader with the CEO and the CFO. We've actually managed to repurpose those to be focused on those big rock key results. So every quarter now, middle of every quarter, we are actually using WorkBoard to actually generate a briefing that actually goes to the CEO and the business leaders that are going to be in those MQR reviews. We don't want to throw them under the bus. So they get a pre-read of what the CEO is going to get up front. They get opportunity to react and maybe update their key results. And so when they go into the conversation with the CEO and the CFO, they're prepared for the conversation. The focus can be on things in the red, right? Obviously, that's the things that probably need some help and some push. But WorkBoard's allowed us to do that using some of the co-author functionality, looking across a scorecard. So I actually have a scorecard that has all 39 of those key results, and I'm able to kind of generate very quickly a bulleted list for the CEO that can go into a briefing document. I think there was a comment from Ivy earlier saying that some executive in your organization was never going to go into the tool. All right. Our CEO has been into WorkBoard. I'm not going to throw him under the bus. He has been into WorkBoard. Has he been in recently? Well, I'll let you answer that question, right? So, so I think that's a reality. Is some executives decide a tool is not for them, right? So having the ability to go into WorkBoard and generate what they need quickly, without having to trawl through the back end of WorkBoard, is actually really helpful for us.
And that brief that you referenced sits on top of the scorecard.
Yep.
For the mid-quarter review, right, for each of the big rocks, and then generative AI gives you the draft of the brief.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly how it's working. We also put a copy of the scorecard in there as well, so there's context. It's not just a random set of bullet points, there is context. So if in a scorecard a key result is orange or red, we highlight it in the text to say, hey, this is a lookout and something that needs to be in the conversation.
Great. I learned one of the big rocks is how Trimble is embracing generative AI in the solutions that it's delivering to your customers. Talk to me about, or talk to the group about how this year's worth of results data and actually having transparency on what teams are working on, how you've leveraged that data in support of that specific key rock and what the insights are from the data.
Yeah, so no surprise, generative AI is part of our current and our future. We are putting Gen AI into our solutions that are customer facing. We're also having a big push on having generative AI in our internal operations as well. So it's kind of twofold. So my boss and I were having a conversation probably back in late January. It's like, how do we know who's working on this stuff? Right? We know that there's people working on this stuff, but without going and calling up everybody and asking them, how do we know? So we went into WorkBoard and we started running some queries, and lo and behold, generative AI was able to produce a laundry list of activity, some of which we'd missed. So we actually have another key result the CEO is tracking, which is actually looking at all the AI activity in Trimble, all the key results that are tied to AI. So we're able to actually produce another list and say, okay, we're tracking this particular number, but there's always other things going on. Should they be included? So that became a conversation point as well about the relative importance of the work that supported those key results and whether it should actually make that list. So we ended up with a list of 17 key results tied to generative AI, which the CEO is also interested in, alongside those 39 big rock key results.
Yeah, and because you had the data, you were able to surface the insight, which is, wow, there's either redundant work and or duplicative work or accretive work that we weren't even aware of.
I think probably more by happenstance that we didn't find any duplicative. Could it have happened? Yes. But as you say, the data would allow us to find that very, very quickly.
Great. Any other victories that you're proud of, the company's proud of, the team that's supporting the program?
So I think we're 4 years into our journey, and I've heard the word journey used a lot. It is a journey. It's going to continue to be a journey. I think it's really thinking about the speed at which you're going to start executing. So it's probably a victory is that we are where we are, but we're actually going to accelerate in 2025. That's what we plan to do.
Great. So good segue to the learnings from the journey, and not as a function of this event, but reinforced by the event is what you've shared around the shift in the communication of the intent of the program and really dialing into the what's in it for me. What does that mean and how is that coming to life?
So a learning as we've gone through 24 and looking back to the first 3 years of the program. When you roll out a program, like strategy execution and thinking about objectives and key results, initially it can come across as you will, and maybe the CEO's there saying you will do this company, right? And we all know what happens when someone gets told what to do something. They'll be compliant for a period of time, and then they'll look over their shoulder and say, oh, no one's watching me, I'm going to stop, right? So we've had that experience. But I think where we are now, we're starting to take the methodology deeper into the organization. I think Eric Huddleston said yesterday, go broad, go deep. We're definitely broad. We've covered just about every part of our business, and we've gone deep in some areas, typically because the people lower down in the organization have wanted to do things, have been very proactive, so this has been fantastic. But in other areas, we've met kind of the Berlin Wall of we're too busy to do this, right? So the thing we're thinking about now is how we educate our leaders, maybe at levels 4, 5, 6, thinking about what's in it for them. We have to make a compelling argument that what we're saying with the program, which is really connecting our strategy all the way down the organization, is the right thing for them, knowing full well that they have a day job, right, and they have commitments during a quarter to actually deliver on, making them kind of understand that we're trying to do here isn't additive to what they're currently doing. It's actually the same thing, right? So if you ask someone what their priorities are, those priorities naturally should probably become their objectives and key results. They're not some kind of separate thing, right?
Mm-hmm. And through the learning cycle, we're now in a cadence where we saw the need to really, really stay aligned with the executive teams. Why do anything? Why now? Why is this important? And we've put in place a quarterly meeting, and it's got ample time. It's a couple-hour meeting with an executive, right? The gentleman who leads strategy and M&A for your business. That was a good learning. Can you talk more about why that's valuable?
Yeah, so we've had a steering committee since the beginning with WorkBoard, which has had, I've actually been part of it since the beginning, and we've had WorkBoard people on, like Maya and our customer success manager, and Mike joined us, I think, end of last year for the first time, and my boss, who is the SVP of strategy for Trimble, also joined, and we did that deliberately. We hadn't really, our executive sponsor, if you like, was our CEO initially on the rollout, and then once things are up and running, his attention went elsewhere. Right? So we were managing a program without anyone really kind of like holding the flag. So having Pete actually on the steerco has been beneficial because Pete obviously has other things he needs to ask. Right? So I think that's been an important thing. Things that maybe the rest of us on the steerco are a little bit more operational and tactical, might not actually think about asking. Having Pete there as well just allows us to think slightly differently about the relationship and what we need to do in the program.
Yep. And what I've experienced is the altitude of the conversation is really dialed into, and where do we need to go as a business? How can this program serve the needs of the company versus the important but different conversations around, and how are we planning for next year? And what's the next refresh and reset gonna look like? So a learning that might be applicable is keeping the executives engaged in the program seems obvious. It's work, right? You have to identify the what's in it for them, but Pete comes to those meetings full of ideas and suggestions, and we generally have a great set of things to work on coming out of those discussions. Yeah. Another learning, and obviously you'll comment on it, was coalescing on, like, making this program have the right visibility and how you built the community of, and we've heard it over and over again, how important community is.
Yeah, so at the beginning of this year, we formally established a results management office. And it's basically me as the leader, and a few of my results management leaders are sat here. So Sarah, Jamie,
raise your hand.
And Sarah, Jamie, and Vanessa. So we have six result management leaders who work with me. None of them report to me. So that's something else I've heard this week is some people have full-on organizations with direct reports running your OKR programs. For us, it's me and my boss, and then everyone else is a dotted line. So I call myself kind of the master influencer. But the reason we formally kind of said we are the results management office is for a long time when we did our initial rollout, we had a group of folks who did the rollout and the implementation for us, working with WorkBoard. And then once we were up and running, that group disbanded and disappeared. And there were I happened to be in the original rollout for one of our segments at the time. And there was this realization, a few of us got together ad hoc, and it was like, oh, we're doing things slightly differently. That doesn't seem right, right? We felt we were, as a business, kind of deviating from the kind of like the sense of the methodology and what we should be doing. And that we felt wasn't good for Trimble. So I ended up inserting myself back in the middle of last year and said, I think Trimble needs somebody to run the program. Oh, and by the way, it's me. And thankfully, someone listened to me and said, okay, it's you, but you're on your own. It's like, so, okay, I'm on my own, great, but I do need to get some help. So that's where the results management leader network has come in. We do also have an OKR coach community. I think what we've heard through the last couple of days is the role of the OKR coach is changing, right? With generative AI and co-author, I think things are actually going to become easier for OKR coaches, and I actually see the actual term changing. I think I saw OKR architects yesterday. I saw OKR champions. I think even something like a strategy analyst is another kind of way of thinking about it. Someone who's able to look at a set of objectives and key results that may be coming out of co-author with a team, having the conversation, but actually fast tracking how long it takes to actually go and create meaningful objectives and key results.
Great. If I can circle back to one of the learnings, because there were some examples of the benefit of really dialing into the what's in it for me. at various levels in the organization. You had a couple of examples where that worked.
So yeah, we actually have one particular example, actually, in my colleague Jamie's part of the organization. We have a leader who's a level 4 leader. She runs a business, and she's actually using the terminology weaponized OKRs.
Oh.
Yeah, right? Now, so think about what that means. We kind of know, well, I'll explain what it means. She has a set of priorities for her business. Okay? Those priorities manifest themselves as objectives and key results. What she tells her leadership team is, if other things come in, other priorities from other parts of the business, I want to know about it. Because if it doesn't align to my objectives and key results, we're not doing it. Right? So she has really weaponized OKRs, and it's kind of brutal prioritization. She's actually saying, we are going to focus on this because it is the most important thing we need to do right now. Doesn't mean other things are not priorities later, but right now we are focusing on these things, and I say conversation will be had if we start doing other stuff. Okay, so that's actually been a really powerful thing. If we've kind of joked, if we could clone that individual throughout the organization, we'd probably be golden. Hard to do, but you know, it's a kind of a dream.
Yeah. And that's probably an individual who suffered from, I had too many priorities, or I didn't know what the priority was. And now I have a framework and a mechanism to get radically clear on. You're nodding your head. Is that the journey this leader's been on?
The right to say no.
The right to say no.
Yeah.
Great. Victories, learnings. We're at a great time to think about, and how will we do better? What can we take from the conference, from our learnings moving forward? And there's probably, leading you a little bit, there's probably we need more people to help support this change and focus on priorities. How's that going to work?
Yeah, so that was my initial thought. You know, I kind of started the planning process in my head about 2 months ago for next year, and it's like, wow, I'm going to need a ton more coaches if we're really going to attack this properly and, you know, increase our level of contribution to the strategy execution. And then I heard Deirdre and Samira talk on yesterday morning, and talking about the golden thread, and it suddenly hit, well, that in conjunction with Gen AI, it suddenly hit me. It's like, well, maybe I don't need to have a ton more coaches. Maybe if we actually do embrace a little bit more of the co-author technology within WorkBoard, alongside the what's in it for me, you can't ignore that still has to be there. Maybe we can actually go faster, because one of the pushbacks from leaders has always been, it takes too long to actually go and create our objectives and key results. I haven't got 3 hours to give you, Duncan. I want to do it in 30 minutes. We know that's not realistic, right? So I usually end up negotiating. Hey, if we do an hour here and an hour here, and then I help you get there, we can kind of get there. But now thinking about what Gen AI can offer us, I think there's an opportunity for us as an organization to effectively serve up some ideas to teams and fast track the planning process. But as I said, in conjunction with the what's in it for me, right? Yep. So here's a set of objectives and key results we think you should do for next year, and this is why we think you should be interested.
Yep. And organizationally, what we put in motion 3-4 months ago was actually bringing your Chief People Officer into a set of conversations around, and what are the initiatives that Jamie's trying to lead with the end of peak performance. And we found a predictable but interesting coalescing of Rob, the CEO, is intent on driving peak performance for the business, and Jamie's a partner in that, and how do we connect the golden thread? So maybe a little bit more on, as we're planning for next year, how we've got more friends to help in that.
Yeah, so that people initiative started earlier this year, and in Trimble parlance, it's called GPS Sync. It was a play on words, Trimble being a GPS company and when it originated. And what it's looking at is looking at every individual in the company, so like 12,000 people. Everyone is expected to have individual priorities that they establish for themselves for a particular period of time with their leader, right? So that's mandated. Everyone will have individual priorities. I have a couple. And we're actually putting them in Workday. We're a Workday house as well. So we started doing that before I started talking to Mike and to Deirdre about this concept of the golden thread. And Mike and Deirdre came along and said, well then, you now have all these individuals with their own priorities. Wouldn't it be great if those kind of manifested themselves as objectives and key results at the individual level? It's like, interesting. Always knew that WorkBoard supported individual OKRs. It's like, thinking about it, I was like, well, let's imagine I'm in a level 8, I'm an individual in a level 8 team. And I now have my individual OKRs. And I'm looking around at my team members and going, oh, you have OKRs as well, and you have OKRs, but none of them align. Think about that. So I, as a leader of that team, I would be working really hard to make sure that my team members have their individual priorities aligned. And if my individual priorities are aligned, why not have team priorities, which of course then become team OKRs? So if you think about the thread of going from strategy, corporate strategy, all the way through to the individual, if individuals start having this ability to have their own priorities, it becomes almost like a catalyst at those lower levels for having team OKRs. So we can, again, top-down, bottoms-up approach. I think using this, taking advantage of the people initiative is going to potentially allow us to kind of seed what goes on lower down in the organization next year.
Right. And you have more friends, competency on change management at scale, when the PX team, right, who has experience doing this at enterprise scale, is helping drive the end game, which is peak performance.
Yeah. And the great thing for me and the results management office is that we're now working with our PX team. So we're not fighting against each other. We're actually working to the same direction. Slightly different agendas. One is business, company performance. The other one is individual performance. But they're actually going in the same direction now. So that's something we're actively working on. So it's like this rather than like this. It's something we're actively working on to include in our planning for 2025.
That's great. Well, thank you. Hopefully the format resonated. A set of victories. Congratulations to you, the business, and the team that supports it. An awful lot of learnings, which will continue. We're never done. And then thinking about the planning and how we adjust moving into next year. So thank you very much for sharing and being a great partner.
Thanks, Mike. Can I just publicly say thank you to my RMLs who are here, so Sarah, Vanessa, and Jamie. I couldn't do this without you guys, so thank you.